for those words. If you're comfortable enough, there is some room around the stage. Feel free to have a seat there. We're going to ask Mr. Rich, if you can, reach that thermostat right next to you. Oh, it seemed like it caught on to it, but can you turn it down some, please? Thank you. Someone said turn it down, turn it off. At this time, I would like to invite to the mic Eric Stephenson. He is a sculptor and he is also the Hunt Studio manager for the Chicago location.
Welcome everyone. Have to admit I'm struggling a little bit back and forth about what I want to talk about. At some levels I could talk about Richard for the next 3 or 4 hours, and although most of it I'd probably be crying through most of it. I do have a few moments of the eulogy I wrote, but I'm trying to think it's like, we hear all these accolades of Richard, and he is an amazing man, he's an amazing sculptor, which he of course was, and we're working tirelessly on emphasizing his legacy moving forward over the coming decades, and we've already made some great strides in that. But you hear the term humble associated with Richard quite often, and that only just gives you a glimpse of what and who Richard was. Richard, aside from, yes, he's extremely approachable, very humble, never touted his accolades. His primary drive in this world was to bang on metal, to play with the materials, and it's whatever he needed to do to facilitate that. He was very good at community outreach, working with galleries, doing the artistic dance, and to sell the work, make the connections, develop clients, make the money, so he can then turn around and ultimately get back into the studio. At any given month, his number one win is if the lights were still on, there were a couple of us around to help him, and he still had materials to work with, it was a win. And so, regardless of what the numbers truly represented at that time. But one of the things I can do is, as was mentioned I think in my intro, I was with Richard for over 22 years, and started off as his head welder for 15 years, and then ultimately transitioned into, I guess, more management, working in the office and helping him out. But the things I really learned working side by side with him for so long was just the magic of how he would look at materials and manipulate them. There was a moment early on, first month or so that I was working with him, and let me back up a second. So to just kind of just briefly describe his process, Richard would draw out on cardboard, creating shapes, and we would cart them out of the metal form, and then he would forge them into shapes. And so he gave me, 2 pieces of cardboard, and I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, these things are so disparate from each other that these must be for two separate sculptures. So I cut them out, and he does a little bit of forging on them, and so he places them together. And at one point, and I do a tack, a small weld, and then he starts rolling this edge together, and I do another tack, and we keep rolling and rolling and folding and folding, keep tacking it on stuff. And I swear these 2 pieces of metal inverted and kind of folded in amongst themselves. It just created this crazy ass shape. And it's like, oh no, I'm like, Richard, how did you know that happened? He goes, I didn't. But the art is all about the combination of play and risk. And so, and having that faith and having that trust both in his abilities and as us as his helpers went a long way into just seeing what happens. And some of the craziest things, as we all know, as mistakes or happy accidents or however you want to refine to them, those are those moments where we really find clarity and the idea of evolution of idea that can really take us to the next level. And so Richard was always in that mindset to experiment, take risks, and to do the work. And one of the things I think about is, if you've ever been to a studio up in Chicago on Hill Street, it's a large building, but he has an office which acted as his office, living room, lounge. And then on the far side of the building, there's a bathroom, and then what he called his loft, which was ultimately a small room and a mattress above the bathroom. And but as he would navigate through the studio, there was never once that he walked from one corner of the building to the other without touching metal. Even if he was an hour late for getting to some show or opera or some event that he was being honored at, he'd disappear, bang on some metal, you'd hear him disappear for a little bit, and next thing you know, you'd hear him bang on some metal as he's coming back through the space, and suddenly he shows up in the office wearing a tux. And so, and then of course his tux is all covered in bronze dust. But that's just the way he rolled, green hair, which is kind of a side effect of working with bronze. But anyway, but my point is that there was never a moment where he didn't walk through his studio and touch on metal and move his ideas forward. And it was intoxicating to be around him on that level for that long. I'm trying to get back into the emotional stuff, and it's challenging. So when I was working with him, there was a key moment, a key series of situations, usually on a weekend when I was working with him, that when the phone was less likely to ring and there was less distractions in the studio, I really tried to pay attention to exactly what his process was and methodology, and try to find out and anticipate his flow. And so, which meant that as he was working, before he had a chance to think about did he need a hammer or a wrench or a weld and some of that, I was handing those tools to him. And so it was just a constant flow. You never would have to ask for them. And we could spend hours that way, into that flow. And we were really trying to create a situation where all he had to do was just be in his groove and make it work. That's the setup to my final little bit, is that a couple of nights before Richard died, he got a call from one of his heroes that he wanted to come visit Richard. And unfortunately, Richard that day wasn't really up for having the energy for visitors, but I figured that with this one visitor, which actually happened to be President Obama, I was like, if Richard realized that I screwed up an opportunity for Obama to come up and hang out with him, I'd definitely get my ass fired. So we made that happen. We smuggled Obama up the back elevator of Richard's apartment, and the two of them sat and had a really lovely moment, exchanging very kind words to one another. But then after the president left, we had a chance to, a few of us that were there, sat down and had a nice little barbecue dinner with Richard, which is one of his favorite meals. And as we were, cleaning up the dishes, Richard, reaches up into the sky and starts drawing in space with his hands, which he did all the time. It was his way of kind of, sculpting in the mind's eye as he was trying to, whether he was standing in front of a blank wall or in front of a drawing or in front of a large sculpture. And I realized that in a soft tone in his voice, he was asking for a weld or a tack. So it's a tough one. And I realized that he was indeed back in the studio working. And so I sat there for about an hour, and asked me if he wanted a wrench or, excuse me, or a hammer, so anyways, we worked the way we did for 15 years, side by side. We were doing it. We're doing it one last time, and as it happened for the last time. But we worked that way for an hour or so until he finally found himself at a stopping point, and then relaxed, brought his arms down, closed his eyes, and went back to sleep. And that was, just a few days before he passed. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.